The poor maid who slept outside at night never imagined that the exhausted man who brushed past her cardboard bed in Lekki before sunrise was a rising billionaire who would one day take her in as his wife. And what happened next shocked everyone who thought they already knew how her story should end. Every night she curled up on the cold tiles outside a locked shop, clutching a plastic bag of second-hand clothes and cheap soap. Every morning he sped by in a dusty SUV, a struggling single dad racing through Lagos traffic, his mind torn between investor calls and his little girl's tears. She was the poor maid people stepped around. The maid who swept classrooms at his daughter's school and slept outside at night because even a one-room face me, I face you was too expensive. He was the quiet billionaire in the making who signed multi-million naira deals on his phone but couldn't keep his own home from falling apart. When the poor maid who sleeps outside at night met the billionaire that took her in as wife, their worlds crashed into each other in the most unlikely place over a child's shame, an empty uniform, and a desperate need for help. But why would a billionaire risk his reputation for a poor maid everyone else ignored? And how did the woman who slept outside become the wife who shocked his ex, his friends, and the whole Lekki estate? The alarm on Daniel Cole's phone had been screaming for 6 full minutes before his hand finally shot out from under the thin duvet, slapping at the screen until the noise died. For a moment he just lay there, staring at the water stain spreading like a map across his bedroom ceiling, his heart pounding with that familiar, guilty panic like he was already late for something and didn't even know what yet. Then he rolled over and saw the time. Shoot, he breathed. Zoe. He was out of bed in an instant, bare feet hitting the cool tiles of his cramped Lekki apartment. Every surface seemed to accuse him. Empty, takeaway containers on the TV stand. A half-folded basket of laundry slumped on the couch. A tiny pink sock clinging to the armrest, like it had given up on ever finding its partner. The fan overhead whirred lazily, pushing hot air around instead of actually cooling anything. He pushed open his daughter's bedroom door with his shoulder. She was a small lump under a cartoon blanket, black curls spilling out over the pillow. For a second, the sight of her made everything inside him go quiet the way it always did, like his whole world fit into that one narrow bed. Zoe, baby, he said softly, touching her shoulder. Wake up, we're late. Her eyes fluttered open, heavy with sleep. Daddy? Is it morning already? Yeah, he forced a smile. And we're running behind, so superhero speed, okay? She nodded and sat up, rubbing her eyes. He crossed to the tiny wardrobe and yanked it open, reaching automatically for her blue school uniform. His hand closed on empty air. He frowned, pushed hangers aside. Nothing. Just one faded dress and a sweater. A cold weight dropped straight into his stomach. The hamper by the door was overflowing with clothes, a mountain of crumpled shirts and tiny skirts and socks. Somewhere inside that heap, the uniform he'd promised himself he would wash last night was balled up and stained with jollof rice and red dust from the playground. Daddy, Zoe's voice drifted over. Where's my uniform? He stared at the laundry, shame burning the back of his neck. I'm going to check something, okay? Brush your teeth. I'll fix it. He scooped up half the hamper and lugged it into the bathroom, turning on the tap over the small plastic basin. Water dribbled out weakly. He dug through damp-smelling fabric until he found the uniform. One look at the stiff tomato stain and the dust ground into the hem and his heart sank. Even if he scrubbed until his fingers bled, it wouldn't dry in time. You had one. Job, Cole. He cursed himself. One job. Images flashed in his mind. The WhatsApp group of school parents. The polished photos on Instagram of kids in crisp uniforms with perfectly braided hair. Proud moms and dads tagging the school, typing captions about first day back and so proud of my princess. And then his little girl, standing in the middle of all that creased dress. No uniform, no mother. Daddy? Zoe was in the doorway now, clutching her toothbrush, eyes wide. Is it dirty? He swallowed. Yeah. Daddy messed up. You're going to wear one of your nice dresses today, okay? Just for today. Her face fell. But they'll all be in uniform. It's just one day, he said quickly, forcing cheer into his voice. That yellow dress you like? You look like sunshine in that dress. Your teacher will understand. She stared at him for a moment, then nodded slowly, shoulders sagging. Okay. By the time he'd hustled her into the bright dress, found one matching pair of socks, and begged the ancient gas cooker to boil water for a quick cup of tea. His nerves were jangling. The apartment felt like it was closing in around him, crumbs on the floor, an unwashed pot in the sink, a crooked family photo on the wall where his ex-wife's smiling face still looked down at them like a ghost. He turned that frame face down every other week, and somehow it always ended up upright again, staring at him, proof of the life he'd lost, and the life he was trying too hard to pretend he didn't miss. Daddy, can you comb my hair like Mommy used to? Zoe asked quietly, sitting on a plastic chair while he fumbled with her curls. The question cut straight through him. He froze, comb in hand. I'll try, okay? It might not be perfect. She nodded, trusting. That trust hurt more than anything. His fingers were clumsy, tugging more than he wanted. He managed two uneven puffs that leaned slightly to the left. Not Instagram ready, but hers. Minutes later, they were racing down the narrow stairs toward the car park. The morning air in Lekki was already hot and sticky, carrying the thick smell of fried akara from the junction and exhaust fumes from the main road. A generator hummed angrily somewhere nearby. As they stepped onto the street, Zoe's hand slipped into his. They passed the row of locked shops beneath their building. Outside one of the shutters, a thin figure lay curled on a sheet of cardboard, covered with a faded wrapper. Beside her sat a small nylon bag and a plastic bucket with a cracked lid. The poor maid who slept outside at night. Zoe glanced at her curiously. Daddy, that's the lady that sweeps our school sometimes. Miss. She frowned. They call her the cleaning auntie. He followed her gaze. The woman's face was half hidden, but he could see the tired lines around her mouth, the way her bare feet stuck out from under the wrapper. For a second, something twisted, in his chest pity, maybe, or the uncomfortable awareness that his own life, as messy as it felt, could be so much worse. We're late, he murmured, gently steering Zoe toward the car. Come on. Still, as he unlocked the old SUV and helped his daughter climb in, he stole one last glance at the sleeping form on the ground. She didn't move. Lagos traffic greeted them like a dare, Okadas weaving between cars, impatient horns blaring, a Danfo bus swerving recklessly in front of him. He gripped the wheel, eyes darting between the road and the time on the dashboard. Zoe sat quietly in the passenger seat, picking nervously at the hem of her dress. You okay, baby? He asked. She shrugged one shoulder. Do I really look like sunshine? He swallowed. You look beautiful. And Daddy promises, next week your uniform will be the cleanest in your class. Deal? She gave a tiny smile that didn't reach her eyes. Deal. When they finally pulled up near the school gates, a line of sleek SUVs and shiny sedans was already there. Parents in pressed shirts and designer sunglasses walked their kids in, straightening collars and adjusting ribbons. Daniel could feel Zoe shrinking beside him. Can you drop me here? She asked suddenly, pointing to a spot before the gate where fewer people were watching. I'll walk. Zoe, I can park and walk you. No. Her voice was small but firm. They'll see. My dress. Please, Daddy. Just here. The shame in her voice hit him harder than any insult. He forced a nod, his throat tight. Okay. Text me when you're in class, all right? She nodded, unbuckled her seatbelt, then hesitated. For a heartbeat, he thought she might hug him. Instead, she grabbed her bag, pushed the door open, and slipped out without looking back, hurrying toward the gate with her head down. "Zoe," he called after her, but the word got lost in the noise of traffic and shouting vendors. He watched her walk away, a small, yellow shape among a sea of blue uniforms, and felt something in his chest crack. Beside the gate, a woman in an oversized apron was sweeping sand off the paving stones. She straightened and shaded her eyes with one hand as Zoe passed, giving the girl a gentle smile. It was the same woman from outside his building, the poor Maid, now awake, her wrapper replaced by a faded t-shirt and long skirt. Zoe glanced up, gave her a tiny wave, and the woman's smile grew wider, softer, like she was used to seeing that little girl. Daniel noticed that smile, noticed how it looked like gratitude and worry and something fiercely protective, all at once. He drove away, feeling like he was leaving his daughter in a world he couldn't control and couldn't quite reach. At the office in Victoria Island, glass walls and air conditioning tried to convince him his life was successful. The company he co-founded, Paywave, a fast-growing fintech, buzzed around him with young staff and ringing phones. His co-founder had once joked that on paper, with their latest valuation, Daniel was already a billionaire. Paper billionaire, he thought grimly as he stared at the spreadsheet on his laptop. Real billionaires probably remembered to wash their kids' uniform. He tried to focus on the upcoming investor call, on numbers with too many zeros, but his mind kept drifting back to Zoe's slumped shoulders, the way she asked if she looked like sunshine. By late afternoon, he was back in Lekki, a plastic bag of groceries in one hand, his laptop bag in the other. His best friend, Marcus Reed, was leaning against the stair railing when he arrived, sleeves rolled up, expression grave. "You look like death, bro," Marcus said by way of greeting. "And your house smells like it too." Daniel snorted weakly. "Good to see you too." "I waited after school to drop Zoe," Marcus said as they climbed the stairs together. "I thought you might be stuck in traffic." She was quiet, man. Really quiet. Guilt pricked again. "Yeah." Morning was rough. They stepped into the apartment and Marcus did a slow turn, taking in the chaos. The laundry basket, the dishes, the scattered toys, the silent TV. "This isn't you, Dan," he said finally. "Remember your old place? Everything in straight lines, shoes in a row by height, pantry labeled like a supermarket. Now look at this." "Things change," Daniel muttered, dropping the groceries on the counter. "People leave." Marcus's gaze softened, but his voice stayed firm. "Your ex-wife left. Zoe didn't. She's here, and she's watching you fall apart." The words hit like a slap, precisely because they were true. Daniel's shoulders sagged. "I'm trying," he said quietly. "I cook. I work. I'm doing my best. I know you are." Marcus stepped closer. "But your best alone isn't enough anymore. Not with the hours you work and the deals you're chasing. She needs stability, routine, somebody who's not half dead from stress to braid her hair and remember her uniform." Daniel bristled. "What do you want me to do? Clone myself? Hire help?" Marcus's tone was matter of fact. "A live-in housekeeper, a nanny, someone who can handle the house stuff so you can be a dad, not a zombie." "No." The answer was immediate, sharp. "Zoe doesn't need some stranger in her space. In her mom's space." Marcus sighed. "Her mom's space has been empty for 2 years. What she needs is someone who'll actually be there when she gets home from school." Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. "I can't afford. You're about to close a Series C round that will make you richer than all our uncles combined." Marcus cut in dryly. "You can afford a nanny. It's not about the money." Daniel snapped. "It's about, I don't want some random woman playing mother to my kid." "Who said anything about mother?" Marcus shot back. "She needs an adult who cares. You lay down boundaries, Keep it professional. But you need help, Dan. Whether you admit it or not. Silence stretched between them, thick as harmattan dust. From the bedroom, Zoe's laughter burst out suddenly at some cartoon joke, then faded again. I'll think about it, Daniel said at last, because it was easier than saying no, and easier than saying yes. Marcus studied him, then nodded. Think fast. That evening, Daniel decided he was going to fix at least one thing. He cooked jollof rice the way his mother taught him over video call, added fried fish, and set the table properly for once. Candles, even, because Zoe liked them. When she sat down, he tried to make his voice light. Special dinner tonight. Just us. She picked at her food, eyes distant. How was school? He asked. Fine. Did anyone say anything about your dress? She looked up then, and his heart broke at the shimmer in her eyes. They laughed. Daddy. One girl said I looked like I was going to a party because I don't have a real uniform. And Mrs. Adams asked why my hair was rough. She said, Where is your mommy, Zoe? She should fix this. Her voice cracked. I don't have a mommy anymore. The words shattered something inside him. He reached across the table, but she jerked back, tears spilling over. I miss her, Zoe choked. I miss when she used to sing in the kitchen and make my hair not hurt and remember my uniform. I'm tired of being different. I'm tired of everyone asking where she is. Why did she leave us, Daddy? Was it my fault? He was on his knees beside her before he even knew he'd moved, pulling her into his arms. Never, he said hoarsely. Never your fault. She made her own choices. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. She sobbed into his shirt, small body shaking. He held her until the tears slowed, until her breathing evened out and her eyelids drooped from exhaustion. Later, after he'd carried her to bed and switched off the light, he stood in the hallway staring at the mess of toys and shoes, the half-empty pot on the stove, the stack of unpaid bills on the console table. The apartment felt enormous and hollow and loud with the silence of everything he couldn't fix alone. His phone buzzed. Marcus, I'm not dropping this. I told my cousin at Zoe's school you might be looking for help. She knows someone. Don't be angry. Another message came through immediately, this time with a photo. A woman in a simple blouse, eyes dark and serious, smile small but real. She looked familiar. Marcus, her name is Grace. Cleans at the school sometimes. Hardworking, no drama. Long story. But she's been sleeping outside a shop near your block since her landlord threw her out. She needs a job and a place. You need help. She can come for an interview tomorrow if you're willing. Daniel stared at the screen, heart thudding. The poor maid who sleeps outside at night. He saw her again through Zoe's eyes, the cleaning auntie who always smiled, who swept classrooms before the kids arrived, who somehow had enough warmth left to give his daughter even after the world had given her so little. A stranger in your space, his fear whispered. Someone who actually cares. Another voice answered. His thumbs hovered over the keyboard, hesitated, then finally moved. Daniel, tell her to come by tomorrow at 6 p.m. He hit send before he could change his mind, then sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. He had no idea that with that single message, he'd just opened the door not only to a maid who slept outside at night, but to the woman who would one day become his wife and shock everyone who thought they knew who belonged where in his world. The next morning arrived too quickly, slipping into the apartment like an uninvited guest. Daniel woke before the alarm for once, staring at the dim ceiling as reality settled. Over him in layers the interview tonight. The guilt still lingering from Zoe's tears. The quiet apartment that felt both like a battlefield and a confession of how hard he was failing. He dressed quickly, mind still foggy, and stepped into the living room to find Zoe already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor in her pajamas, drawing something on the back of an old receipt. Crayons were scattered everywhere. She didn't look up when he approached. Morning, Sunshine, he said softly. She mumbled something without lifting her head, and the distance cut at him all over again. He forced cheer into his voice. Let's do better today, yeah? Daddy woke up early, so we're not rushing. She gave a tiny nod, still focused on her drawing. He couldn't see her face, but her shoulders carried a heaviness that didn't belong on a child. After a quick breakfast of toast and Milo, he guided her toward the bathroom. She brushed her teeth in silence. He combed her hair more, carefully this time, taking twice as long, trying to make each motion gentle, as if careful hands could repair something deeper. Her uniform was still wet on the clothesline, so one of her other dresses had to do again. A pink one this time. She didn't complain. That hurt even more. By the time they stepped outside, the sun was already warm, spilling across the street in bright golden streaks. Down by the row of shops, the same cardboard bed from last night sat flattened against the floor. The woman wasn't there. For a moment, Daniel paused, staring at the empty spot longer than he meant to. It was strange how quickly someone you barely knew could occupy space in your mind once you finally noticed them. He unlocked the SUV, and Zoe climbed in silently, her backpack hugged to her chest. Traffic was worse today. A trailer had stalled in the middle of the Lekki expressway, causing a chain reaction of horns, shouting drivers, and restless commuters leaning out of their mock windows. The noise pressed against the car like a physical weight. Zoe kept her gaze fixed on her knees. Every attempt at conversation felt like tossing a pebble into a deep well. No echo, no ripple. When they reached the school, parents were already gathered at the gates again. Children in spotless uniforms and shiny shoes clustered with their mothers or nannies. Some of the parents turned as Zoe stepped out of the SUV in her pink dress. Their glances weren't cruel, just curious, judgmental in that casual Lagos way that said we notice everything. Zoe saw the looks too. Her chin trembled for half a second before she lowered her eyes and walked faster. Hey, Daniel called gently. Wait, I'll walk you in today. She spun around quickly, panic crossing her face. No, Daddy, no, please don't. I'll go. But, sweetheart, Daddy, please. The desperation in her voice stopped him mid-step. He forced himself to nod. Okay. Text me when you're in class. She turned away again, moving quickly through the gate. Halfway across the compound, she stopped. For a moment, she simply stood there, uncertain, small. Then the woman from last night, now in her faded apron, approached with a broom in one hand. She bent slightly to say something to Zoe, her face warm with concern. Zoe nodded softly, managing a tiny smile. Daniel watched the interaction from inside the SUV, something unfamiliar twisting in his chest. Gratitude, maybe, or the ache of realizing someone else had managed to give his daughter the comfort he struggled to offer. He drove off slowly, feeling the heaviness settle over him again. At work, everything felt louder than usual, the clicking keyboards, the ringing phones, the chatter of a team preparing for another investor meeting. His assistant stopped him twice to ask about emails he hadn't answered. His co-founder pulled him aside to discuss expansion numbers for their East African launch. He nodded through everything, spoke when necessary, but even the promise of multi-million-dollar growth couldn't distract him from the image of his daughter slipping into school alone, wishing she could disappear. Sometime after lunch, Marcus called. "How's your day?" his friend asked bluntly. "Fine," Daniel lied. "Did Zoe talk this morning?" "Not really." Marcus sighed heavily. "Dan, you need help. Real help. Not temporary fixes." Daniel leaned back in his office chair, rubbing his temple. "I know. She's coming today. The woman you mentioned. Grace." "Good," Marcus said. "She's a good one." "You sure?" 100%. The confidence in his friend's voice steadied something inside him. Hours later, the workday ended. and Daniel found himself driving back through Lekki with a strange mix of dread and hope simmering in his stomach. He picked up Zoe from school. She climbed into the car quietly, but today she at least glanced at him once, a small flicker like she was waiting for something better to happen. Evening traffic glowed orange under the falling sun. When they finally reached the apartment, Daniel checked the time. 5:42 p.m. Grace would be arriving in less than 20 minutes. He looked around the living room, the scattered toys, the unwashed dishes, the laundry he'd forgotten to fold. A wave of embarrassment swept through him. This place. We need to clean up, he murmured to himself, bending to pick up a shoe. Zoe watched him quietly from the doorway. "Daddy?" she asked softly. "Is someone coming?" He hesitated, then nodded. "A helper. Just someone to make things easier for us." She blinked slowly. "Will she stay here?" "If we like her," he said gently. "Only if." Zoe's fingers twisted in the strap of her backpack. "Okay." He didn't know what her okay meant. Approval? Fear? Acceptance? Resignation? At exactly 6 p.m., a soft knock sounded at the door. Daniel froze. Zoe looked up. Another knock. Gentle. Patient. He walked slowly to the door, placed his hand on the knob, took a breath. Then he opened it, and everything in his life changed. Grace stood in the doorway, framed by the dull hallway light, hands clasped around the strap of a small nylon bag. Up close, she looked different from the blurred figure he'd seen on the cardboard outside the shop and the quick glimpse at the school gate. Not different in clothes, her blouse was still simple, her long skirt a little faded, her sandals worn thin but different in the way she held herself. Her posture was straight despite the obvious tiredness in her eyes, like life had pushed hard but not broken her. "Good evening, sir," she said quietly. Her voice was soft but steady, no begging in it, no desperation, just respect. Daniel blinked, momentarily thrown by the odd familiarity of her face. Then it hit him, the same woman whose bare feet he'd stepped past in the early mornings, the same woman who had smiled at his daughter at school. "You're Grace?" he asked. "Yes, sir." She nodded. "Marcus's friend sent me your address. I hope I am not late." He stepped aside quickly. "No, you're right on time. Please, come in." She slipped inside, clutching her bag close, eyes darting around the living room like she was trying to take everything in without staring. The scattered toys, the laundry, the sink visible from the hallway with dishes stacked like they were trying to climb out. It was only then that Daniel saw his apartment the way a stranger would. Chaotic, tired, overwhelmed, a home barely holding itself together. Zoe peeked from behind the hallway wall, eyes wide. Grace's gaze found her instantly. Something in her face softened, brightened. "Hello," she said with a small smile. "You're Zoe, right? You like drawing stars on your notebooks?" Zoe blinked. "How do you know?" Grace's smile widened just a grand, little. "I sweep your classroom in the mornings. I see your drawings sometimes. They are very nice." Color rose to Zoe's cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. The fragile thread of warmth between them made Daniel's chest ache. Grace turned back to him, her hands folding neatly in front of her. "Should I sit, sir?" she asked. "Yes, of course." "Sorry." He gestured toward the couch, then remembered the pile of laundry there and hurried over, scooping it into an armful. "Just give me a second." Grace moved before he finished, reaching out quickly. "Let me help, sir." No, he said, flustered. "You're here for an interview, not to." But she had already taken half the load, balancing it easily. She glanced toward the hallway. "Where can I put these?" He opened the bedroom door with his elbow, and they dumped the clothes in an empty laundry basket by the wardrobe. When they came back to the living room, Zoe was sitting on the edge of a dining chair, watching with open curiosity. Daniel gestured for Grace to sit on the armchair opposite him. He took the couch. For a moment, no one spoke. The small ticking wall clock suddenly seemed very loud. He cleared his throat. Okay. So, Marcus told me a little about you, but I'd like to hear from you directly. How long have you been working at the school? Almost a year, sir, she replied. I clean the classrooms and offices. Sometimes I help the little ones when they spill food or when they cry. Her eyes flickered briefly toward Zoe. I like children. Daniel noticed the slight Lagos accent curling around her words, soft, musical, firmly Nigerian, and the way her hands twisted together in her lap like she was willing them to stay calm. And before that, he asked. She hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly, I worked as a live-in housekeeper in Ogudu, sir, for 3 years. I cooked, cleaned, helped with their children. But when the madam lost her business, they had to let me go. After that, I paid for a one-room in Ajagunle, with the little I saved. When the rent finished and I could not find steady work, the landlord pushed my things out. Her jaw tightened just slightly. That is when I started sleeping outside the shop near here. It is safe enough at night. And the shop owner allows me to keep my bucket and bag there during the day because I help sweep. Daniel felt a knot forming in his throat. He thought of his own complaints, no time, no sleep, not enough help, and then pictured this woman carefully folding herself onto cold tiles each night. Do you have family? He asked gently. She shook her head. My parents died some years ago. I have a younger brother, but he is in the village with our aunt. I send money when I can. A tiny shrug. Lagos is expensive, sir, but God has kept me. There was no self-pity in the way she said it, just a quiet acceptance, and something like determination. He glanced at Zoe, who was hanging on every word, her brows knitted together in a little frown. What are you looking for now? He asked. Be honest. Grace took a breath. I am looking for steady work, she said simply. Somewhere I can cook and clean and help take care of a child, if there is a child. Somewhere I can sleep inside, not on the floor outside a shop. I am not afraid of work. I want to feel safe again. Her voice trembled on the last word, just slightly, and then steadied. From the hallway, a faint thunder rumble rolled in from far off the lagoon. Storm clouds were coming. Daniel clasped his hands together, weighing the tangle of fear and hope inside him. I'm a single father, he said. I work long hours. My daughter, he glanced at Zoe. She's been going through a lot since her mother left. I need someone who can help with the house, with cooking, laundry, school runs when I can't make it. Someone patient with children. I can pay well. But there would be rules. Grace nodded immediately. Of course, sir. Rules are good. You'd have your own small room, he continued. You don't touch my personal things. You don't bring visitors here. You don't raise your voice at my daughter. Ever. If she is wrong, you call me. You don't talk about her mother in front of her unless I say it's okay. And, he hesitated, feeling strangely vulnerable. This is a job. Nothing more. No. Confusion. Grace's eyes flickered, understanding more than he said. I am here to work, sir, she said quietly. I don't cross lines. I know my place. The phrase know my place rubbed him the wrong way, but he let it go. Maybe because he wasn't entirely sure of his own place anymore. Can you start tomorrow? He asked. Yes, sir. Then she quickly corrected herself, as if unsure. If you decide to take me. He glanced at Zoe. What do you think, sunshine? Zoe startled at being drawn in. She looked from her father to Grace, chewing on her bottom lip. Then she slid off the chair and approached the armchair slowly. Are you the cleaning auntie that always tells me well done when I draw? She asked. Grace's smile warmed the whole room. Yes, it is me. You don't laugh at me when my hair is rough. Zoe whispered. Grace's eyes glistened. Children are not supposed to worry about hair, only about being happy. Something in Daniel's chest cracked open again. He saw his daughter reach out, just a little, as if drawn to that soft, steady kindness. He didn't need a spreadsheet or a background check to see the answer. "You're hired," he said quietly. "We'll draw up proper papers later. For now, I'll pay you monthly and provide food and accommodation. Your room is small, but it's yours. And if anyone mistreats you in this house, you tell me, even if it's me. Understood?" Grace blinked, clearly not expecting that last part. "Yes, sir," she said, voice thick. "Thank you." Thunder rolled again, closer now. Rain began tapping against the window like impatient fingers. That night, while the storm raged over Lekki and the power flicked on and off, Grace curled up not on cardboard under a shop front, but on a thin mattress in a small room off the kitchen. She listened to the rain drumming the roof and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude into the darkness. In the next room, Zoe fell asleep faster than she had in months. The faint scent of stew and fresh soap drifting in from the kitchen where Grace had scrubbed every pot until it gleamed. And in his bedroom, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the fragile shift in the air, a strange, dangerous sense that for the first time in a long time, his home might be moving toward something like peace. He didn't know yet that the poor maid who now slept under his roof would become more than just help. He only knew that when morning came, everything would be different. He just didn't know how different. Rain woke him the next morning, hammering the roof in steady sheets. But it wasn't the storm that made Daniel sit up in bed with a strange feeling in his chest. It was the silence. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of the past months, but a new kind. Soft, alive. He stepped into the hallway and stopped. The apartment didn't smell like stale food and old stress anymore. It smelled like pancakes and syrup and something warm that reminded him of Saturdays when his mother used to sing over a frying pan. In the kitchen, Grace stood at the stove in a borrowed t-shirt and wrapper, quietly flipping pancakes in a pan. On the counter, a lunchbox lay open. Already half-filled sandwiches cut into neat triangles, slices of apple. A small note folded in half. Zoe sat at the table in her proper school uniform, hair parted in straight lines, 2 perfect puffs, sitting proudly on her head. She was laughing at something Grace said. A bright, unguarded laugh Daniel hadn't heard in what felt like forever. He leaned on the doorway for a moment, just watching. "Good morning, sir," Grace said when she noticed him, her eyes crinkling slightly. "We tried to let you rest. Your daughter has eaten, bathed, and we are almost ready for school." Zoe spun in her chair. "Daddy, look. She can do hair without it hurting." He swallowed past the lump rising in his throat. "I see that," he managed. "You look amazing." The morning that usually felt like a battle now ran like a well-rehearsed song. Grace moved quietly between rooms, setting Zoe's shoes by the door, tucking the lunchbox into her backpack, reminding Zoe about her homework. Daniel found himself almost unnecessary, and for once, instead of feeling threatened, he felt relief. Real, bone-deep relief. On the drive to school, Zoe chattered nonstop about pancakes and how Auntie Grace knew the name of her favorite storybook. "You like her?" he asked carefully. Zoe nodded so hard her puffs bounced. "She doesn't look at me like something is wrong with me because Mommy is not here," she said simply. "She just sees me." That stayed with him all day. Weeks blurred into a new rhythm. Mornings smelled like breakfast and hair cream. Evenings sounded like Zoe's laughter drifting down the hallway, the soft murmur of Grace's voice reading stories, the clink of plates being washed instead of left to sulk in the sink. Grace ran the home with quiet efficiency, never making a show of her work. She learned where everything was without asking twice, folded laundry with gentle hands, left sticky notes by the door reminding him of PTA meetings and school projects. She braided Zoe's hair into neat styles, slipped small encouraging notes into her lunchbox. You are brave. You are loved. I am proud of you, and waited at the gate after school, with a bottle of water and a smile. At first, Daniel tried to stay out of the way, keeping things strictly professional. He reminded himself she was the maid, the nanny, the live-in help. This was a job, nothing more. But the line blurred the day he came home early, on a rainy Friday. The apartment was dim and cozy, the storm muting the sounds of the city. He walked quietly down the hallway and stopped at Zoe's door, the faint glow of a lamp spilling out through the crack. Inside, Grace sat propped against the headboard, one arm around Zoe, a book open in her lap. Zoe rested her head on Grace's shoulder, eyes half closed. One hand curled into the fabric of Grace's sleeve. They were wrapped in a soft blanket, the kind of easy closeness that looked like it had always been there, like they had grown that way. Zoe giggled at something in the story, and Grace laughed too, a low, warm sound that filled the room. The sight hit Daniel like a punch and a blessing at the same time. Not because his ex-wife wasn't there, but because for the first time, that absence didn't feel like a gaping wound. It felt replaced, repaired, even, in a way he hadn't believed was possible. Grace glanced up and noticed him. "Oh, sir, we didn't hear you come in. We were just—" He raised a hand. "It's okay. Don't get up." Zoe wriggled. "Daddy, Auntie Grace reads better than you," she announced. "She does voices." He smiled faintly. "I believe that." His eyes met Grace's over the top of Zoe's head, something unspoken passing between them, a shared understanding of what was happening in this small, ordinary, extraordinary moment. He hesitated, then said quietly, "You can call me Daniel. In the house, I mean. Sir makes me feel like someone's principal." Grace blinked, almost startled. Then she smiled, slow and a little shy. "Okay," she said softly. "Daniel." Something shifted in the air when she said his name, like a new chapter, quietly turning. The next week, the world barged in. He was in the office when his phone rang. The caller ID made his heart stutter. Amelia. His ex-wife hadn't called in months, not for birthdays, not for holidays, not even to check if Zoe was still in Lagos or living on the moon. He answered anyway. "Hello, Daniel." Her voice flowed through the line, smooth as ever, with that practiced hint of regret. "I heard Paywave just closed that big round. Congratulations, Mr. Billionaire." He tensed. "What do you want, Amelia?" A small laugh. "Straight to business. Fine. I'm back in Lagos. I want to see my daughter." The familiar cocktail of anger and old love and fear rose in his throat. "Now you want to see her? I made mistakes," she said, the words perfectly rehearsed. "I was overwhelmed. I left. I've had therapy, I've grown, and I want my family back. Zoe deserves her mother. And you," she let the sentence dangle in the air like bait, "you shouldn't be raising her alone." He thought of the poor maid who used to sleep outside at night, now turning his chaotic apartment into a home. Of the way Zoe's eyes lit up when Grace entered a room. "I'm not raising her alone," he said quietly. A pause. "What does that mean?" "Come tomorrow," he said. "See for yourself." He hung up before he could say anything he'd regret. That evening, he told Grace everything. They sat at the small dining table after Zoe had gone to bed. The only light came from the overhead bulb and a candle, Zoe insisted. Made dinner fancy. He told her about the marriage that had burned too hot and too fast, about the promises that had crumbled under pressure and ambition, about the day Amelia packed a suitcase and left a note on the counter instead of staying to fight for their daughter. Grace listened without interrupting, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, her eyes soft and steady. When he finished, she said only, "I am sorry. Not everyone who gives birth knows how to be a mother." The simple sentence knocked the air out of him. What if she comes and And you feel uncomfortable? He asked. You don't have to be here when she arrives. I will be here, Grace said calmly. Your daughter will need someone in the room who is not angry. The next day, Amelia arrived dressed in expensive perfume and high heels that clicked sharply against the tiles. She walked into the apartment like she still owned it, eyes sweeping over the now neat space, the photos on the wall, the small pair of shoes by the door. So this is how you live now, she said lightly. Domestic billionaire. I like it. Her gaze caught on Grace as she emerged from the kitchen in a clean blouse and skirt, wiping her hands on a towel. And who is this? Amelia asked, one brow arching. This is Grace, Daniel said. She takes care of the house. And of Zoe. Amelia's eyes flicked over Grace from head to toe in a single dismissive glance. The help, she said, lips curling slightly. Of course. Grace lowered her gaze, but her shoulders didn't slump. She simply murmured, Good afternoon, Ma, and stepped back. Zoe came running from her room at the sound of her mother's voice. For a heartbeat, time-folded mother and daughter facing each other after 2 years of absence. Mom, Zoe whispered. Amelia's face rearranged into a performance-worthy expression of tenderness. My baby, she cooed, arms opening. Mommy missed you so much. Zoe walked into the hug, stiff at first, then melting just a little at the familiarity of the perfume, the feel of silk under her cheek. But even as Amelia stroked her hair, Zoe's eyes darted sideways, looking for Grace, making sure she was still there. The tension in the room was a living thing. Why don't you and Grace go to your room for a bit? Daniel suggested gently. Mommy and I need to talk. Zoe looked instantly panicked. But I'll be right here, Grace said softly. We will just draw. Okay? Zoe's hand found Grace's immediately. Okay, she whispered, and allowed herself to be led away. When they were alone, Amelia dropped the act. You replaced me with a maid, she said flatly. You left, Daniel replied. I hired someone to help me keep our daughter's life from falling apart, she scoffed. You really think a poor girl who used to sleep outside is fit to raise my child? He stared at her. I think a poor maid who sleeps outside at night and still finds enough kindness to smile at my daughter at school has more heart than anyone who willingly abandons their child. For the first time, a crack appeared in her poise. I want my family back, Amelia said, switching strategies, eyes glossing with well-timed tears. We can fix this. You, me, Zoe. But she goes. Her chin jerked toward the hallway. Fire her. Today, I won't share my home with the help. Old memories tried to pull him under the photos, the laughter, the years when he thought their love would outlast anything. But another image pushed through stronger. Zoe sleeping with her hand curled in Grace's sleeve, the apartment filled with warmth and peace. The poor maid who had quietly become the center of their tiny universe. I'll give you my answer tomorrow, he said finally, voice flat. You can go. She left in a huff, heels stabbing the floor. He found Zoe and Grace in the bedroom, sitting side by side on the floor. Crayons, again. Only this time, the drawing was of 3 stick figures holding hands. A tall one labeled Daddy, a medium one with a skirt labeled Auntie Grace, and a small one labeled Me. Zoe's eyes were red. Daddy, she burst out, scrambling up. Is Auntie Grace going to leave now that Mommy is back? Please don't make her go. Please. I feel safe when she's here. It's like my heart can breathe. Grace looked horrified, already shaking her head. No, Zoe, don't. Daniel's throat closed. He pulled his daughter into his arms. No one is making decisions without talking to you, he said hoarsely. I promise. Later, after Zoe had cried herself to sleep and the apartment had sunk into that fragile post-storm quiet, He walked into the kitchen and found Grace packing her small nylon bag. "What are you doing?" he asked, panic spiking. She didn't meet his eyes. "Your wife is back, Daniel. I should go. I thank you for everything. But this is not my house, not my family." "Stop," he said sharply. She froze. He stepped closer, heart hammering, every defense he'd built around himself straining. "You came to this apartment as a poor maid who slept outside at night," he said, voice low. "You turned it into a home. You gave my daughter back her smile. You gave me back my sanity. You are not just the help. Not to us. Not to me." Her eyes shone with unshed tears. "But what will people say?" she whispered. "The billionaire and the maid, your friends, your investors, your ex-wife. They already talk," he said with a crooked smile. "Let them. They didn't hold my daughter while she cried. They didn't write notes in her lunchbox. They didn't stay up scrubbing this place until it felt like somewhere worth coming back to." He took a breath that felt like a leap. "Grace, I'm in love with you," he said simply. "I didn't plan it. I didn't think it was allowed. But it's the truth. I don't want you to leave. I want you here, with us, as part of our family." She stared at him, lips parted, like the words had knocked the air from her lungs. I love you too," she admitted, voice shaking. "But I was ready to bury it, because men like you don't marry women like me." He stepped closer, gently taking the bag from her hand and setting it on the counter. "Then, maybe men like me need to change," he said. A voice cut through the moment like a blade. "Unbelievable," Amelia hissed from the doorway. They spun to see her standing there, having walked back in without knocking, eyes blazing. "You really are planning to replace me with the maid?" she snapped. "This is insane. You're going to throw away your image, your money, your reputation for her?" Daniel didn't flinch. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing the people who stayed." Amelia's gaze darted to Grace. "You think you've won?" she spat. "You're nothing. I gave him the life he has. You're just enjoying what I built." Grace opened her mouth, then closed it, fingers twisting together, shoulders drawn but unbroken. The small patter of feet sounded in the hallway. Zoe appeared, sleepy-eyed, rubbing her face. "Why are you shouting?" she asked, voice small. Amelia rushed to her. "Sweetheart, Mommy and Daddy are just talking. Come. We're going home. Just you and me. Like it's supposed to be. Tell Daddy you're coming with your real mommy." Zoe froze, eyes wide. Slowly, she twisted, looking at her father, then at Grace. Daniel went down on one knee so he was level with her. "Hey," he said softly. "No one is going to drag you anywhere. You get to choose who is in your family. Not just today, but always. If you want to go with Mommy, I won't stop you. If you want to stay here, with me and Auntie Grace, we'll fight to make that happen. Your voice matters. Do you understand?" Tears filled Zoe's eyes. She looked at Amelia's perfectly made-up face, the stranger mother who smelled like expensive perfume and broken promises. Then she looked at Grace, her auntie, who smelled like pancake syrup and hair cream and home. In the end, the choice wasn't dramatic. She simply walked over to Grace, slid her tiny hand into the maid's worn fingers, and held on. "I want to stay," she whispered. "With Daddy and Auntie Grace. She's the one who feels like Mommy." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Amelia's face crumpled, anger, shock, humiliation flashing and twisting. She opened her mouth, then shut it again when she saw Daniel's expression. Calm, resolute. "Leave," he said quietly. "You're always welcome to be part of Zoe's life if you actually show up for her, but you don't get to bully her, or Grace, or me, to get what you want. Not anymore." For a second, he thought she might fight, then she grabbed her purse and stalked out, slamming the door behind her like she was trying to break the whole building. Silence fell. Then Zoe let out a sob, throwing herself into Grace's arms. "Are you still staying?" she cried. "Please don't go, please." Grace held her tight, tears spilling freely now. She looked at Daniel over Zoe's shoulder. He nodded once, his eyes saying everything his mouth couldn't yet. "I'm staying," Grace whispered into Zoe's hair. "I'm not going anywhere." 6 months later, the Lekki apartment was almost unrecognizable. The walls, once bare, now held Zoe's framed drawings and candid photos. Grace and Zoe mixing batter in the kitchen, Daniel asleep on the couch with Zoe sprawled across his chest, the three of them grinning in the park. Music played most evenings. Marcus dropped by so often he joked about paying rent. Laughter lived there now. Paywave's valuation had exploded. On paper, Daniel was no longer just a paper billionaire. People in the city whispered his name, in restaurants and on blogs. When word spread that the billionaire in Lekki had quietly married his former maid in a small court ceremony, it sent shockwaves through their world. Some people mocked. Some called it romantic. Some refused to believe it. He didn't care. On Grace's birthday, he and Zoe decorated the living room with cheap balloons and paper streamers. Marcus handled the jollof. Daniel baked a slightly lopsided cake with too much frosting. When Grace walked in from the market and saw it all, she stopped dead, one hand flying to her mouth. "Happy birthday!" Zoe screamed, running forward. "Sit, sit, sit." They ate, they laughed, they sang off-key. At the end, Zoe grew suddenly serious, digging in her pocket. "I made you something," she said, handing over a folded piece of colored paper. Grace opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, in slightly crooked letters surrounded by too many hearts, Zoe had written, "To the best mom in the whole world. From your daughter." Grace's vision blurred. Tears slipped down her cheeks, falling onto the paper and smudging the ink. "Oh, Zoe," she whispered. "My baby." Daniel watched them, his heart so full it almost hurt. He stepped behind Grace, resting his hands on her shoulders, bending to press a slow, reverent kiss to her hair. Later that night, after Zoe fell asleep amid wrapping paper and leftover cake, Daniel and Sestentin, Grace stood by the small balcony window, looking out over Lekki's lights. "Do you ever miss the quiet?" he joked softly. "When it was just me and my mess?" She leaned into him, head against his chest. "No," she said simply. "I used to sleep outside and ask God if there was still a place for me in this world. Now I have you, and Zoe, and this noise." She smiled. "This is better." He tightened his arms around her, remembering the first time he'd seen her curled on that cardboard, the poor maid who slept outside at night, invisible to everyone. If someone had told him then that she would one day be his wife, the mother of his child in every way that mattered, and the center of a home that finally felt whole, he would have laughed. Now, as the city hummed below and their daughter snored softly down the hall, he just held her and whispered the truth against her hair. "You shocked them all. You know," he said. "My ex, my neighbors, the investors, everyone. The poor maid who sleeps outside at night, married to the billionaire. They didn't see it coming." Grace smiled, closing her eyes. "As long as you and Zoe saw me," she murmured, "that is enough." And in the small Lekki apartment that once felt like a battlefield, the poor maid and the billionaire stood wrapped in each other's arms, their new family stitched together not by perfection, but by choice and by a love that had shocked everyone who thought they already knew how their story should end.